Hey, it's John Finch with the Father Effect Show. For those of you who are new to the show, our goal is to help fathers become the fathers God created them to be. Today's guest is Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, also known as the Dad Whisperer, and among many other things, she is an author, a counselor, and newly married. We'll get into that in just a minute. Welcome, Dr. Michelle.
I'm excited to be here, John, as always. One of my favorite people.
Well,
For
I
real.
feel, I
You're
feel
the
the
girl
same
dad.
way.
Hashtag girl dad right there. I'm glad to
There
pick
you
up.
go. Exactly. Hey, so before we jump in, actually, tell everyone who you just happened to marry. What has it been, 6 months or how long ago was it?
No, 4.5. Yeah, we're newly married right in the middle of Corona. Go figure. Coronavirus. So, yeah, the crazy story in a nutshell is I am 60 years old and I just got married for the first time. Go figure. And it's a love story where really God, a year ago, I wrote in my journal, if you want me to marry this man, I will say yes. And I wasn't going to do marriage till every heart of every dad in this nation had turned to his daughter. That was my whole lane, as you know. And then I wrote this in my journal as a little surprise thing that I didn't tell anyone. Ken called me on January 1st of this year and said, on the phone, I couldn't even see him, I would like to move from professional to personal. I'm deeply in love with you and I want to marry you. And I'm asking you to without a ring. I'm proposing and I'll call your dad if you want me to. What? And I said, well, I wrote you a letter a week ago on Christmas Day and you already have my whole heart. And he was like, what? So the man that I married, we'd been colleagues since 2011 and he wrote the foreword to my first book. He started the National Center for Fathering 30 years ago. So we've been colleagues for a lot of years and totally above board friends. And his name is Ken Canfield, and his wife died last year of a long disease. And so it had been really a rough season for him and surprising even to him that God would say, Michelle's for you. And I'm like surprised that I would even be open to marriage. So we've been married since June 20th. We had to get married Father's Day weekend after all. So I've now inherited 24 people in my tribe and I love it. So yes, I'm a newlywed.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that you both are just so engaged and focused in helping fathers. And obviously we've had many conversations and I love what you're doing to help fathers and daughters. And today we're going to talk about 5 questions that every dad can ask his daughter to have a closer relationship with her. But as we jump into that, tell everyone a little about this new book that you wrote.
Okay, so I wrote a book called Let's Talk, Conversation Starters for Dads and Daughters. And this was born out of a long journey that I've been on for the last decade of coaching dads of daughters ages 13 to 30. That's their girls are in their teens or their 20s. And I coach 12 dads a year for 9 months in the school year. We meet once a month. It's called the ABBA Project. ABBA meaning daddy in Aramaic, and men love a project, hence the name. And really what my desire is, John, as you know, is to really help dads decode their daughters. And so every month we do themes and I give dads scripts to have dad-daughter dates. I get that everybody doesn't like that term, call it whatever you want, hang out or whatever, where you get a time one-on-one with your daughter, looking at each other side by side, having conversations. This isn't just about doing things together, which is great. But really what I found, John, is that when we as girls open our mouth, our heart opens. And when our heart is open, a dad's heart is open. And if I would ask you and every dad listening, can you tell when the women in your life are closed for business? We stop talking. And you as men are like, what did I do? I don't know. And I'm like, okay, it all comes down. If you can get her to talk and slowly open up to you, her heart's going to open up back up to you. So really, again, my goal, I stated, I restated, is to help you as a dad be equipped with scripts in your hands to lead conversations with your daughter. So that's what this is, 60 scripts. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Lots of stories in between, stats, research. Really, in a goal, Dad, my goal is to help equip you to lead, to be the hero you want to be and that your daughter needs you to be. So it's really a field guide for men who have daughters that didn't come with a playbook, but they're going to help. I'm going to help them write one because they're going to write out the answers that their daughter says in this book or an adjunct book. Help you be an expert with your daughter.
You know, and this is what I love about, I remember when you were first talking about this new book and before it had been released, and the thing that hit me, and I've learned over the last few years, and I've mentioned this many times recently because it's so fresh and new, and it's for me, it was like an eye-opening piece of living with 3 daughters and a wife, is the importance of listening. You know, I think what I've learned is so many times my girls come to me, and even early on in the marriage, which I didn't get this at the time, but my wife would come to me and they don't want advice. They don't want a lecture, nothing. They want me to sit and listen. And the importance in all of that also is being able to ask the right questions, because I think that's why I love this book and what you're doing, because so many dads out there, we are kind of a little clueless when it comes to the other sex, especially our daughters, in trying to know what questions to ask. So I love it, love it, love it. Let's dive into, and now I know there's 5 different sections within the book that you talk about, and we're going to dive into one that's the 5 questions that help a dad have a closer relationship with his daughter. But kind of break that down real quick before we jump in.
Sure. Well, let me just say one thing in response to what you just said, John, is that even Ken had said to me, you could have called this book, Let's Talk and Listen. Just like you, he picked up on the importance of listening. And I'm going, where else do men hear this? I don't think that's I mean, did you ever hear that as a young dad with your daughters? It's really important that you listen. I'm going, where are men going to hear how important that is? And I think for a lot of men, that feels like you're doing nothing. I'm just sitting there. Well, active listening is nodding your head, saying, turning toward her, putting down the remote, not having your cell phone on. That's what active reflective listening looks like. And so, Dad, if you have a daughter that's venting to you and you're saying, okay, do I give advice? Do I not? Does she just want me to listen? Knowing that we as girls figure things out by talking, that's why you're so much of a help when you do listen. But you can just ask her a question, which I got from one of the dads in my groups that I lead. He said he's learned to just ask his daughters, is this a listening session or a fix-it session? Just to ask her straight up and she'll tell you, yeah, I could use your advice. Yeah, help me fix this. Or she just may say, listening. And then you don't have to worry about not getting it right, which leads me to part 2, Dad. If you use the scripts in this book and your daughter says, that is such a stupid question, blame me, I'm your fall guy. So you can't do it wrong. Okay, so that's my setup to say the 5 sections of the book are lead her to laugh, lead her to love, lead her to look, lead her to lament, and lead her to listen. So really what I'm really highlighting here is my goal is to equip you to lead. Because I think we live in a culture where men don't always get, I would say, the tools in their toolbox as a father that they need to lead. And sometimes you're out there kind of lost in the sea of estrogen going, I'm kind of bouncing around and I don't know what to say. And I would rather say nothing than say it wrong, or I'd rather do nothing than do it wrong. And I'm saying, Dad, it's so important that you dial into her heart space. And if you don't know what to say, I'm going to give you the words, and then you open the book and you read it to her. It's based on themes. You can let her pick them. And then you don't have to worry about doing it wrong. I'm your fall guy.
Hey, by the way, for those of you who are watching, if you know of a dad who has a daughter that needs to hear this conversation, make sure you share it with them.
I mean, Dad, did you know that when you laugh with your daughter or with anyone, it increases social bonding and reinforces and strengthens relationships? So if you can do activities, which I have some of those in there, and have conversations that are about laughing together, you're going to be closer to your daughter. And sometimes if there's been a breach in your relationship, starting with laughter is the best way to start. So you might want to ask her, what item of my clothing would you love to see me get rid of? Let her make fun of you. I mean, John, what clothing items would your daughters, what do they make fun of you of that you wear? What are those items your daughters would love to see you get rid of?
You know what? That list could be pretty long for me. My daughters, I'm not the most fashionable guy in the world, as you know, as you probably see. It's like I wear the same 3 or 4 T-shirts and same 3 or 4 pairs of shorts pretty much every day. So I'm a creature of habit, if you will.
Right.
Hey, if you're getting value out of this conversation, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you will be alerted every week when we release a new video.
Okay, so they make fun of your clothes, your shirts. That's what my dad had this one that said Narrow Road, which was from some old band that never made it. Why he had that shirt for 25 years is beyond me. But I think in some ways he might have liked the fact that we made fun of him for it because he knew he'd get a rise out of us. But there you go, lead her to laugh and then lead her to love. The truth is, if we don't love ourselves, right, we don't give out love. And so this is helping your daughter connect with where she's passionate. It's helping her to learn to love her body. A lot of dads in my groups have never talked to their daughters about body image. Like, let's leave that up to mom. So again, I'm going to give you scripts. She can learn to connect with the truth of who she is, the gifts she has, so she can give that out. Then lead her to look. This one is about going a little bit deeper into looking at really complex issues: suicide, cutting, anxiety, depression, sex, sexual harassment and assault. A lot of these harder issues. And even if your daughter, for example, has never dealt with cutting or suicide or depression, I guarantee that she's had a friend who has dealt with those issues. Great way to open up a conversation. Then the next one is lead her to lament. That's where we're going to focus today. So I'll come back to that one in a minute. And the last one is lead her to listen. So this is about flipping the script so that your daughter has the book in her hands and the questions in front of her to ask you questions, Dad, about your life. So 54 of the scripts and the activities are dad to daughter. The last 6 are daughter to dad. So she can learn to strengthen her listening skills as well, to learn to listen to you.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so the lament piece, and again, in looking through it and actually reading the book, I love that I got an advanced copy and all that stuff. I feel so special.
Because we're BFFs on this fathering thing, you know. Right?
Yes, it's the same tribe and group. Seems very small, but anyway, 5 questions. So what would be the first question that a dad would need to ask to again have that closer relationship with their daughter?
First question, Dad, and I wrote these out. I want to make sure I state them not just from my heart, but really I've thought these out, is ask your daughter, what is one thing about you that would help me be a better dad to you if I understood it? If that's too long, just say, what could I do to be a better dad to you? Because here's the truth, is the areas where your daughter doesn't get your best, or she's been hurt by you. So that's not your best is a void, a father void. The other is a father wound, where you may not even remember what you said to her. Because the truth about grief is that the one who's been hurt remembers longer than the one who caused the harm. And if you ask your daughter, what could I do to be a better dad to you? Or what is one thing that if I understood it, I would be a better dad to you? Don't be surprised if it involves some kind of a wound that she has. And there will be a story behind that. Like, what would that be like for you, John? If you asked, think of one of your daughters and you said, what could I do to be a better dad to you? Or what is one thing that if I understood it about you, I would be a better dad? Can you give an example? Now I'm putting you on the hot seat of one
You know what?
Your daughter might say.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I don't remember where I heard this, but I did hear this exact piece that you're talking about. And I don't know if it was from Dr. McMeeker or whomever, but it was.
You wrote the forward to my book, as you know.
There you go. Exactly. And this amazing lady, and oh my gosh, her in the movie and what she did. My wife still to this day loves sitting and watching some of just the uncut stuff that we never released.
Oh, you got to send that to me. Yeah, I love your movie. And
you know what? Speaking of that, we are going to do an unplugged piece with her, which is going to be the whole interview with just me and her, uncut, unedited, the whole bit. So it'll be good. But so back to your piece is, I remember somebody giving me advice early on, asking your daughter from time to time, hey, what can I do better?
Yeah.
How can I be a better dad? And it's interesting, the girls in the conversation, the daddy-daughter dates, which I love. You mentioned a while ago about I guess some people don't like it. I still to this day love daddy-daughter dates, even the term, it's the endearment.
Yeah.
because of those times that I had with my girls
Mm.
and the intimacy of all that, they were so much more willing to open up to me if it was just me and them versus
Uh-huh.
me and the rest of them or whatever, right? So there was always like things like I'm trying to think of a specific answer that one of them ever said. Uh, of course,
I know
my
I'm putting
brother.
you on the spot, but you know what? As you're thinking, let me just highlight that I've had many dads in my groups over the last 10 years say that some of the most significant conversations they had were in the car on the way to the restaurant. Right? That it's that side by side, shoulder to shoulder orientation that oftentimes makes it easier to talk because you're not looking at each other. But dad, even if you have a daughter that isn't so comfortable with face to face, it's so important that you lead in that because we live in a culture where they're on Snapchat and TikTok and everything has distance and not real time FaceTime. So as you lead your daughter to engage with you in person, you're building her skill set, right? For her job down the road, any interviews that she'll ever do, any kind of interpersonal engagement is going to be strengthened by that kind of conversation with you, especially with men, which she's going to encounter in the world, whether it's teachers, employers.
Well, and I was just fixing to say, even that question from her dad will then allow her then to have that same conversation and ask her husband that question. Hey, honey,
Uh-huh.
what can I? So from a marriage standpoint, from you setting them up for success down the road, I love it. I love it. Question number two would be what?
Okay, here we go. Dad, ask your daughter, when you think about our relationship through the years, when do you remember us being the closest? And are we as close as you would like us to be now? So you're having her think back. I would imagine if I asked you as a dad, when do you remember being the closest to your daughter? I mean, John, again, you're a dad to three daughters and you're in the fathering space. How many dads do you think would say like 5 and under, 10 and under versus teenage years or 20 somethings? What do you think?
No, I agree. So I think the younger they were when it was jump up a dad's lap and cuddle and just play and have a blast. And then it's like they hit that 12, 13, 14 years of age.
Yep.
And they're trying to find their independence. They're kind of, don't want dad to drop them off in front of the school or, or in front of their friend's house or whatever, that whole thing. But then they come back around. And what's interesting is my oldest one, and they've all done this. My oldest one is now 21.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the last year or so. She's a little more mature for her age, but it's been the last year or so. She's come back around to now we've got this really good relationship where she knows she can ask me anything. She can talk to me about anything. And we have this, it's a different level as adults. And it's the first time because she's my oldest.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see that kind of circle back around because I talk to a lot of dads and a lot of dads with daughters and they're like, oh my gosh, my teenager. And I'm like, look, dude, that's normal.
Yes, it's normal for her to push away. And I always say to dads, if you want her to use her voice out in the world, you have to let her practice honing her voice at home. And so if you can reframe that and say, oh, wow, her bucking up against the system or pushing back against me and our rules and our boundaries. Oh, wow, she's developing muscles that are going to help her say no outside of our house. If you can think of it that way, you may not be one that just wants to kibosh all of the pushback, but have conversations. And that's why I include those. I have things about boundaries. Get her talking because the more she can understand more how to think rather than just what to think, again, she'll be stronger out in the world, right?
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it.
keeping the conversation
Question
going. Ready for number 3?
3. Yes. I was trying to figure out which number we were on.
Do I do anything that shuts you down or makes you feel less confident to share your thoughts and your feelings with me? Now you notice it's, do I do anything? Because I imagine a dad might be able to give literally a laundry list of everything your daughter does that makes you either push back or reinforce boundaries. But really, this is about having a conversation that allows her to tell you, it's lead her to lament areas that she maybe has been hurt by you that she's never felt the freedom to tell you about. And dad, I would really encourage you, if you're a dad that's prone to anger and being more the strong, rule setting dad that says my way or the highway, it might be important to tell her, I won't get angry at anything you tell me, because she may not feel safe with you to really tell you what she feels if she fears that you'll have a big reactive response that then shuts her down more. So there's a real practical thing you might want to slide in. So question, do I do anything that shuts you down or makes you feel less confident to share your thoughts and your feelings with me?
And I love that question too, because I think it leads to such great conversations as a result, because this would be a great place. I tell dads all the time, share your story, share your own
Absolutely.
story of your own father and the way you grew up, and just, you know, the bits and pieces. You don't have to share it all at one time. It might be overwhelming, but the bits
Yeah.
and pieces of,
Uh-huh.
you know what, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
This is the way I grew up, and there's a lot of things that I'm still learning as a dad. And because I tell my girls this all the time, at
Mm.
53 years old,
Yeah.
52, I'm still learning,
Mm.
and they know my background. And it's like, growing up without a father, there's a lot of junk that comes along with that.
Yeah.
And it's like no affirmation and insecurities and fears and all these things. And so for me to share some of those with my girls, it's interesting because I think psychologically, then they're connecting the dots and going, oh, okay, now that kind of makes sense. So it
Mhm.
almost, it allows them to have a little more compassion. Doesn't make your behavior any more right, but it helps them see that you're
Yeah.
doing the best you can and that you're going to do the best you can to change, right?
A couple thoughts come to mind. Is one is that you're modeling humility. So more is caught than taught. So when you say, I don't have it all together, you're going to create a different dynamic with your daughter, right? That she doesn't have to have it all together. Number two, when you tell your own story, it's going to remind you as a dad that you didn't have it all together at her age either. So I think it's a good reminder to you of where you were at her age, which is why in that last section, lead her to listen. She'll ask you questions about how you got along with your dad, or what were you like when you dated, or what were you like as a student or an employee, those kinds of questions, so that she can, again, like you said, see that you're human. And a way that I made that come alive with my dad. So my dad's in his 80s now, grew up in Chicago, South Side. He was in gangs from the time he was 12. Three different last names among the dads in their home. Like, his dad finally left when his mom put an iron to his face when he came home in a drunken stupor one time. I mean, no model, right, of how to be a dad, to state the obvious. So my dad often would just never talk about it because it had too much pain, or he didn't think I'd care. So I came up with this idea where my dad and I would do Monday night shopping together. We did this for probably 5 years till a couple of years ago. But we'd go to Costco and then to this grocery store across the street. I'm a cheap date. We just do Costco dinner, and or Sam's Club. You guys probably have that in your area. And on the way home, about a 10-minute drive, I started priming my dad by saying, tell me one story on the way home in the car. One story about your life. I heard stories I'd never heard. Some of them heartbreaking, but it would be even things like, in Chicago, the ice would freeze over on the lakes. They all had their own skates, and he's sliding out there and goes across the ice, and a can had frozen with the lid up. And he goes, see this scar right here? It's because I hit it. But I went home, and this would have been like the 40s. He goes, my mom sewed me up because we were so poor. We didn't have health insurance. And I'm like, your mom sewed it? So, I mean, in 10 minutes, I started collecting stories. So if you're a dad that says, I don't really know what stories to tell, maybe that idea of set the timer for 10 minutes, tell her one story. In fact, a lot of them my dad told would be about that time of year. So, oh, it's Christmas or it's Halloween. What did you dress up as? I mean, I got to hear that my dad would dress up as a box. That's what he would be. He'd cut a hole in a box, and that was it. Great stories. Never thought to
You know
tell
what?
him until then.
No, and I think, and I talk about this in the movie actually, but it was so much real life to me. Only in the last 10 years have I began to learn about my dad and hear stories. And I could sit for hours with my uncle, with my mom, with whomever, and just listen to them tell stories, because I think every single one of us has this innate curiosity to know more about our dads, more than he's just dad, that he's human, that like you said, little stuff. What was his favorite ice cream growing up? What was his favorite candy? Who were his best friends? What did they think about him? You know, all these things. And I think there's always those pieces to our lives. If we don't know those things, that then it's almost like they're just missing pieces. We need to know that kind of stuff just to be ultimately, I think, fulfilled as humans and as sons and daughters.
And I I really do want to put a plug for the Father Effect right now, because your movie models that as you tell your story, John, so vulnerably. I mean, watching it, I had tears, pouring down my cheek. That's why I had you on the Dad Whisperer twice as a guest. I'm like, share the story of how you worked through the loss of your dad, making amends after he was gone, right? And I think this springboards not only into just plugging your movie, because you're modeling to men what that looks like, and then they're hearing from experts, right, who weigh in on the importance of doing your work around your own father wounds and your own father voids. Because if you don't do your own work, it's going to be really hard to lead your daughter or your son, right, to look at wounds from you or voids from you. But even this morning, I got an email from a dad who said, I just read the first 40 pages of your book, my first one, Dad, here's what I really need from you. And he said, I've been crying all the way through to see everything I've done wrong. And I'm thinking, okay, that isn't my goal, is just I'm not beating men up. Again, as a whisperer, I didn't come up with that term, the dad whispers. Another dad called me that. He goes, Michelle, I don't know how you do it, but you seem to whisper to us. And we men don't like women shouting at us. So I'm saying, Dad, say it like this, and I think you're going to open up a different conversation. But I highlight that story, John, to say that daughter is given a gift in a dad who's willing to, with humility, to now say, I've done so many things wrong. I guarantee that daughter has a gift with that dad, because he's going to come softly with humility to make amends rather than just with defensiveness. That will turn our country the other direction, as girls have dads who are modeling the very things they want to see in their daughters and building bridges to their hearts, which oftentimes includes making amends and doing this lament work. In fact, Ken, my husband, said, I think this is the most important chapter in the whole book, important section.
Yeah, and I do too. I would have to agree that I think what we're diving into here, these specific questions are the most important, because again, the closeness and the intimacy, I think, that can come as a result of these conversations and these questions is off the chart. A question number 4.
Okay, number 4. Do you ever get mad at God or blame him for taking someone away from you? If so, what does that look like? And if not, what does it not look like or feel like? So, Dad, here's a lament question. And I have a lot more in the book. These are just 5 I picked out. But really, you're asking her about a loss or grief that she's carried. It might be a pet she's lost. It might be a teacher or a best friend. It might not be to death. But I mean, I could tell you about losing my first best friend when I was in 6th grade, and she chose a new best friend. Well, it might not surprise you to hear I've had that theme repeated, because it's just the nature of, does that happen? I say I'm from Venus, you're from Mars. John, I literally haven't thought to ask a guy this. Do you have many stories of losing a best friend where a guy picked a new best friend? I'm guessing not really. It seems like more of a chick thing.
Yeah, I think it is. I think guys, at least in growing up, especially even as a young man, when I had a good best friend who was a pastor's kid, and they moved to Arkansas. I remember, for a week or two, just being all down and bummed. But then it was like, the next thing I know, I got another new best friend, blah, blah, blah. But I love this question, because it does, I think so many of us, even as adults, there's things like this that we don't discuss that are in our past that we don't even realize played a part. And as unimportant as we may think it is, because it was so many years ago, or whatever, a pet death or whatever, I think this is where we really tune into our daughters' hearts, where they see, man, Dad's really interested in me, my concerns, my worries, everything going on in my life. So I love that question.
And did you notice that I included God? Is that Like, here's the question again. Can you remember, or here, can you remember a time where you ever got mad at God or blamed him for taking someone away from you, or a job promotion, something away from you? And then you ask her to tell you more. Because just last Friday, one of my sisters, it was her birthday, and my mom and I were sitting at lunch. And actually that came up organically with tears coming down her face about some significant losses and blaming God, and not wanting to blame him, but saying, I don't understand. He has a lot of explaining to do. Wow, I really felt like I was on holy ground that she would be that open and vulnerable with us. And so, Dad, if you might be one that might be quick to go, now, God is sovereign and he has all things in his hands. And, he works all things together for good. That's the best way to shut her down. But you're just saying, tell me the stories. Tell me the stories of where you've been hurt and there's been a loss. Have you ever blamed God for that? She might have actually thought that, but thought, I don't think my dad could handle knowing that. So you're leading in the conversation and leading her to tell you more by asking it that way.
Well, too, and I think too, in exemplifying vulnerability, because us as men really have a tough time doing it, but for her to see in her dad, for I think daughters to see dads cry, to show real emotion in a world that tells us not to, that all of this other mess, that it's like, it's okay to be real. And my girls have seen me, my girls have seen me cry multiple times, and I got no problem with it,
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
But I think it helps them see that, again, I'm human, I make mistakes, I mess up, and it's okay. It's okay to be real and vulnerable with other people, which most women don't have a problem with that. But for them to see a man do it, I think it is very, very important. So I think
there's never a gift in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're going to bond more. And I've even found that a lot of men experiencing as dads more healing for some of their stuff that they didn't even know needed healing. But as they talk with their daughters more with these scripted questions, it's unearthing some things in their history that they didn't even think about doing work on. Daughters have a way of doing that, don't they? Of kind of getting into that heart space. And so, Dad, again, like John was just saying about telling your story, these questions are a great way maybe for you to model to your daughter. And I say maybe, it might not be your style or you might not be ready to go there. But John and I are we're champions of fathers and saying, here, Dad, tell your own story first of maybe being mad at God and blaming him for a loss. Tell her how you worked it out or where you're still stuck.
Well, no, and I think that even that is a great piece of advice, because I know a lot of times in talking with my daughters, what helps them, the walls to come down, is to share, maybe start out sharing one of my own things that of a story, like you just said. If I'm wanting them to share about a place or a thing that's happened in their lives and that they believe God caused or allowed to happen or whatever, I'll start out and say, hey, you know what? And then I share my own story. And so then it really helps them open up to go, wow, you know what, Dad, me too. And so the conversation starter, that in itself is such a great piece. A question, are we on 5?
Yeah, we're on 5.
Question number 5.
And I'll repeat them all at the end because I know this might be a lot for dads to take in. Here's the last one. Can you remember any specific words that I've spoken to you that have stuck with you, that have made you feel better about yourself? Can you think of any specific words I've spoken to you that have stuck with you, that have made you feel better about yourself, but then it has the other side of it? Can you think of any words I've spoken to you that have stuck with you that have made you feel worse about yourself? Because again, this section on lamenting, think about the value of cleaning out those wounded areas now so they don't stick with her and fester and turn into something else. Because how many girls go looking for love in all the wrong places? Because they're like, that guy he'll never hurt me with his words. He'll tell me what I want to hear. But little does she know is those are a lot of times the players, right? And I say dads, dudes, or duds. A lot of those duds know how to play the field. He'll tell her what she wants to hear. But imagine, Dad, if you clean out places where you've, wounded her, and she's still carrying those wounds from you. You may not remember them, but if you can clean them out, I think she's less vulnerable to the guys that just tell her what she wants to hear. Maybe to actually clean out some of those wounds. And he doesn't even know she's been wounded in those areas. But say that you as a dad tell her all that she doesn't do right. You got a B, but you could have gotten an A. Or, you did the chores, but you complained. Or, you didn't make your bed quite right because the room could have been cleaner. And you notice a lot what she doesn't do right. And then this guy comes into her life that he's like, I love the way you do. You put together outfits so great, and you do everything you do, man. You just have a golden touch. And he's just building her up, building her up, building her up. Maybe because he has an agenda, probably, right? Because guys don't naturally keep up with all those compliments. Am I right?
It's true. You're actually describing the young man that I'm scared to death of with my girls, and it's that punk, right? That I know.
That punk.
Yeah.
He's like working her. He's a player. But Dad, if you're complimenting, if you're every day thinking, what is one way I could build up my daughter? I want to speak words of life into her so that she's not so thirsty in the soil of her heart that she'll take any drop of water from any dude or dud or punk. I love that.
You know what? No, I love this because I think so many fathers, we don't understand how we wound our daughters in the words that we say, in the tone that we speak, in all of those that you just laid out, kind of like always on them about this, that, or the other, instead of speaking life and love and encouragement every chance we get, so that they're not combating. Because I'd never thought of it. If we're doing that, then they're going to be able to, I think, much more recognize the player.
Absolutely. Just like what they do in the FBI, right? You study the authentic money, the authentic currency, so that if a fraudulent piece of money comes through, it stands out. You don't study every type of fraud kind of, right, currency. You study the real so that anything else stands out. Same here. You get the real deposits into your heart as a daughter from your dad, where there's not an agenda. And again, this isn't about you being perfect, Dad. It's about being present. It's about showing up in your role, whether or not your dad modeled it to you. It's never too late. And I haven't written this dad back yet today that I told you I got the email from. But I'm saying to him, it's never too late. Your daughter is so blessed to have you as a dad who's being honest about your shortcomings and limitations. And he said, I'm going to get done with this book and then I'll get your new one. And I'm like, wow, this daughter's going to be able to have a dad that opens up with her about where he's realizing he's failed. And I'm telling you, some dads, you might think, oh, she'll think less of me. I'll come down in her eyes as less than perfect. I'm like, well, she probably already knows that.
Well, and two, in knowing that, and I tell people this all the time, especially guys, fathers, because they need to know it. Those that it does click, you go, look, dude, you're lucky. You're one of the blessed ones, because there's men out there and fathers out there that it never clicks. They never get it. So
Right.
the fact that you're getting a second chance, dude, grab hold of that bad boy and just move forward, because it's.
And this is my counseling office right here. I mean, the amount of tears that have been shed right in this space from daughters, doesn't matter if she's in her teens, her 20s, her 30s, her 40s, even 50s, tears coming down the cheeks of women that are saying, I wish I was closer to my dad. It's rare. It does happen. Like a teenager recently said, oh no, my dad and I are super tight. Like almost like she was like, I don't think we could be any better. But then again, I know I'm telling these stories, but my heat went out last week. So on Friday night, a heater guy was here till 10:30, emergency appointment to assess the problem. And I am not kidding you. The guy was literally bleeding about estrangement from his 25-year-old daughter. And I literally said, can I text you a question? And it was one of these. What could I do to be a better dad to you? He hasn't talked to her for 3 years. And he texted me the next morning and said, I went home and I had a wet face. You know, he didn't say tears, but I gave him my book. I'm like, it's never too late and it's up to you. Dad, you've got to turn your heart first to your daughter. Then she'll turn her heart to you, but it starts with you. God said it. It's up to you. And he's like, I know. But I wasn't trying to beat him up. but I was trying to challenge them. I'm like, don't men do that in sports? I mean, how much would you like watching NFL football on television if the guys got knocked down and said, I'm done, game over, or start crying on the field that they couldn't do it? Can you imagine football like that? It would not be what it is, or basketball or whatever. Like, you as men are wired to get knocked down and you get back up. You got to do that with your daughter. She needs you as a dad to pursue her heart with everything you've got. So can I repeat my questions?
Absolutely.
Because that was a lot to take in. Okay, Dad, ask your daughter, 1, what is one thing about you that you want me to know that would help me be a better dad to you if I understood it? What's one thing that I could do to be a better dad to you? That's another way you could ask it. Number 2, when you think about our relationship through the years, when do you remember us being the closest? And are we as close as you'd like us to be now? There you go. In fact, I asked my dad that question, by the way, and you know what he said? I don't think we're as close as you'd like us to be.
I like him. That's a great.
I said, you're right. And then guess what he said to me? If I'm honest, Michelle, your words wear me out. I was like, okay. But we had a real talk. We had an honest talk, and it was awesome because he got to tell me what he was feeling. But there you go. That led to a really great conversation with my dad as an adult. Number 3, do I do anything that shuts you down or makes you feel less confident to share your thoughts and your feelings with me? And remember, you got to couch that one with, and I promise I won't get angry no matter what you tell me. Number 4, do you ever get mad at God or blame him for taking someone or something away from you? Then just tell me more. And last question, can you remember any specific words I've spoken to you that have stuck with you that have made you feel better about yourself? Followed up with, can you think of any specific words I've spoken to you that have stuck with you that have made you feel worse about yourself? And then if she tells you, or when she tells you those things, Dad, the key is to say, I'm so sorry for saying, and then repeat it. Will you forgive me for saying those things? Not just I'm sorry, but when you say, will you forgive me? That's how you reinforce or rebuild the bridge from your heart to hers. And I guarantee that when you do that, come humbly, you're going to strengthen and reinforce that bond with your daughter that will affect her life for the better and yours in every way.
I will make sure to list in the description below all the ways that you can connect with Dr. Michelle and how you can get her book. I love it. Hey, show us the book again.
Yep, there you go. Let's talk conversation starters for dads and daughters.
And it even has the new author name down there.
It does. I had to change that halfway through. Isn't that something?
That's awesome.
Yes, Michelle Canfield.
They can get that Amazon, all the normal places, right?
Or yeah, and you can go to my website, drmichellewatson.com, where I've got free resources, a link to the Dad Whisperer podcast there, or on Spotify, Google Play, or iTunes. So I'm all about resourcing dads, helping you get in the game and really take an active role in your daughter's life. No matter what your history has been, start today. It's never too late. John and I believe in you. We're championing you as fathers. And you may not think you have what it takes, but we're all about equipping you with more resources to lead.
Amen. Website, podcast. The podcast name is The Dad Whisperer, right?
Yes, The Dad Whisperer.
And then social media, how can they reach out via social media?
Yep, I'm on Facebook. I also co-lead with Ken, my husband, the Dad-Daughter Initiative of the in the National Center for Fathering, so you can go there as well. And then anything, you just type in my name. I forget what all of my handles are, but I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So you can find me there by typing my name, Dr. Michelle Watson.
Love it.
I don't have the Canfield on most of it yet. I've just still have the Michelle Watson part there. So still in flux. You know.
Don't you just love to, I mean, it's got such a great rhythm and sound to it. Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.
I love it. I know. And here's the thing I would also add to dads is I've had some men say to me, I don't know why I would listen to a woman telling me how to be a better father. I literally have had it written and said to my face, and I don't take offense at that. I say, you know, honestly, for real, I've said the same thing to myself. Like I would have disqualified myself in this assignment that God whispered to me a decade ago. And yet at the end of the day, aren't we kind of in the same boat, Dad? Where we would all disqualify ourselves from any assignment that God's given us. You as a dad, me as a dad whisperer, but really at the end of the day, we're being faithful with what he's told us to do. And then somehow we come together in that and strengthen our bond, because I'm really about helping you understand what it's like on my planet of Venus. I call myself bilingual now, Martian and Venusian. I speak both. But really my goal is to help you understand your daughter better. If she doesn't have the words to tell you, I'm hopeful that my words will help enlighten you a little bit more in case your daughter doesn't know what to tell you she needs.
Well, and I love it and love what you're doing, because obviously you are a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been there, lived it, know it, breathe it. But you also see however many clients or patients every week, every year, all throughout this whole period. So you've heard the stories. You know what these daughters need and desire and are missing and all of that. So I think it perfectly comes together. And there's just, it's so much valuable information. Every time I talk to you, I learn something,
Oh,
and there's something that I can take and then implement and use with my own daughters. And I'm going to do what you said with the book. I'm going to take, I still have a 14-year-old at home.
yeah.
So I'm going to take and spend some time with her and go through those questions, because I think,
And let her pick. That's what I say to dad is when you go on your date, just open up the table of contents and just let her choose, what topic would you like us to talk about tonight? And you're off and running. In fact, I've got one of my clients, and she's gay, in a gay relationship, was raised in a Christian home, and dad doesn't know what to say about that. So they're, instead of getting to the same sex attraction questions, that's the deep end, they're starting in the love question and then questions. And then this week she said to her dad, I don't want to do the talking this time. Can I do the questions on you? Do one of the questions, to know more about, she said, I heard stories of his childhood I'd never heard. But she said they're committed to once a week. I mean, that's really impressive.
that's
With an
awesome.
adult daughter to do once a week dates. I'm saying dads make it a minimum once a month, but this dad gets extra kudos from me on that. So really, like you can tell, John, and we're kind of stating the same thing, is you and I are both about making practical resources available to fathers to support them in one of the most important roles they'll ever have in their life. Because at the end of the day, they're building a bridge to God as a father, whether they know it or not. And I really think of no higher calling that God as a father could have and give to someone on earth than to say, I'm going to have you be part of the representation of me to your kids. Whoa, what
And
an
you know
honor,
what?
privilege.
That's a whole nother conversation too, and I love it, that the importance of that and making dads understand it. And we could go on and on and on. Sorry.
We could. This has been awesome.
I'm going to have you back, but in the meantime, people know how to get in touch with you. They know how to get your book. I greatly appreciate you taking the time. This is like the third or fourth or fifth or 12th or something. Help me and
Oh,
videos and interviews.
always a joy to talk with you, John. Thanks for having me.
Hey, greatly appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again soon.